How dare you get engaged the same month as your brother? Cancel it, you're ruining his moment, Mom shouted. My brother smirked. Nobody wants to celebrate you anyway. I said, I understand. I updated the $18,000 family dinner I'd paid for and blocked their numbers. When they showed up at the restaurant and the manager asked for their credit card, the call came on a Tuesday night while I was still getting used to the weight of the ring on my finger. 3 days. I had been engaged for exactly 3 days, and my whole life felt like something warm and bright and finally mine. I was standing in my kitchen making pasta, the water just starting to roll into a boil, the radio going low in the background, and my mother's name lit up my phone screen. I answered it the way I always did, without hesitation, because she was my mother, and I had spent my entire life answering when my mother called. In less than 5 minutes, she turned every soft thing I was feeling into gravel. My name is Maya. I am 29 years old. I work the front desk at a dental office in Columbus, Ohio, a job I have held for 6 years, where I manage scheduling, handle the phones, and occasionally talk a terrified patient through a breathing exercise our hygienist taught me. I make $38,000 a year before taxes. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of an older building on the east side of the city, and I like it. I have a fire escape I sit out on in the summer with a book and a glass of something cold. I have a cat named Biscuit who is deeply opinionated about when dinner happens. I have a life that is not glamorous, but is mine, fully and completely mine, built on my own without much help from anyone. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest of this. My family is my mother Sandra, who is 54, and my older brother Derek, who is 31. My father left when I was 7 years old. He moved to Arizona with a woman from a work conference, and we saw him at Christmas twice after that, and then not at all. What that did to my mother was make her pour everything into Derek. Every hope, every soft look, every dollar she could manage. Derek became the symbol of something she was refusing to let fail. He was proof that she had not been destroyed by my father leaving. And I was the background. Not actively dismissed, not unloved exactly, just not chosen, in that quiet way that takes a decade or so to fully understand. Derek got a car when he turned 17. I got a card and a $20 bill. Derek's college fund covered 2 years at Ohio State before he switched his major 3 times and eventually stopped going. I worked at a grocery store from the time I was 16 and put myself through community college while paying my own phone bill, and by the time I was 18, a portion of my own living expenses, because my mother had redirected the money she might have given me toward Derek's various situations. Derek's situations were always significant, and always temporary. A failed landscaping business that collapsed within a year and a half, a period where he needed help with rent, a car repair that was suddenly urgent. My mother moved money around for Derek the way people rearrange furniture. Constantly, and always toward him. I want to be fair. She was not cruel to me. She was just absent in the specific ways that matter most when you are a kid trying to figure out your own value. She forgot my graduation from community college because she was helping Derek move into a new apartment that same weekend. She announced Derek's engagement at a family dinner months before he made any public announcement himself. When I got promoted to lead receptionist and called her to share it, she said, "That is great, Maya," and then told me for 11 minutes about Derek's plan to get his real estate license. I had learned by then not to expect much. I had learned to be okay with that, the way you become okay with a window that does not quite seal in the winter. You just put a towel on the bottom. You stop noticing the draft after a while. Then I met Caleb. Caleb is 31 and works in IT support for a logistics company. He is the kind of man who fixes things quietly without announcing that he fixed them. He remembers the specific details of things you said weeks ago and brings them back exactly when they matter. He makes terrible puns and laughs at them before you do, and somehow that makes them funnier. He said, at the end of one particularly exhausting Thanksgiving with my family, that he thought I was the most generous person he had ever watched give to people who did not appreciate it. I told him that was dramatic. He said he was being precise. He proposed on a Saturday in October, in Goodale Park, under an oak tree, where we had sat and talked for 4 hours on our second date 3 years ago. He had the ring in his jacket pocket the whole time he was walking around, pretending to just want a stroll in the fall air. When he got down on one knee, I said yes before he finished the sentence, and he laughed and said, "Wait, I had this whole speech." We were both crying by the end of it. Small and private and exactly right. I had been planning a birthday dinner for Derek for 2 months already. Once a year, I organized something for the family. Not because anyone asked me to. Not because I got credit for it. But because if I did not do it, nobody would. And I had this stubborn belief that family showing up for each other mattered, even when the showing up only ran in one direction. For Derek's 32nd birthday, I had reserved the private dining room at Albury, a beautiful Italian restaurant downtown. The kind of place where they bring fresh bread without you asking, handmade pasta, real seasonal menu, enormous wine list. I had reserved it 8 months in advance and prepaid the full $18,000 in installments. Every payment came from my account. The private dining room, the open bar, the 4-course dinner, the custom cake, and the gratuity arrangement had all been locked in under my name. 40 guests. Open bar, 4-course dinner. The total, including a custom birthday cake and the gratuity arrangement, was $18,000. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. $18,000. On a $38,000 salary, I had saved for months. I had adjusted my own budget in ways that were not comfortable. I had said no to a vacation Caleb and I were loosely planning, because I wanted this dinner to happen. I did it because I thought it was important. Because I wanted to do something big for my family, even though they had never done anything like that for me. I did it because I was, despite everything, still trying. 3 days after Caleb proposed, I called my mother to tell her our news. She was quiet when I told her. That particular quiet that means someone is organizing their response. Then she said, "Maya, Derek got engaged 2 weeks ago, the same month." "I know," I said. "I was there when he announced it. So you understand that you cannot do this right now." I held the phone away from my face for a moment. I was certain I had misheard her. "You cannot get engaged the same month as your brother," she said, and her voice rose so sharply that I pulled the phone away from my ear. She was not explaining anymore. She was shouting, angry and certain, as if my happiness had personally offended her. "You are taking attention away from Derek. People are still celebrating him. An engagement announcement from you right now will overshadow his moment, and that is not fair to him. Mom." I said, "Caleb proposed to me. I did not schedule it. You can tell people it did not work out for now and announce it again in 6 months. Give Derek his time. That is what a good sister would do." I sat down on my kitchen floor. My legs just stopped working in the way legs do when something lands on you that your body has not been prepared to hold. Then my mother tapped something on her screen, and Derek's face appeared in the corner of the video call. I had not realized he had been sitting beside her the entire time. He leaned closer, wearing that small, satisfied smirk he always got when he knew Mom had already chosen his side. Which meant Derek had been sitting there listening and had said nothing while his mother told me to cancel my engagement, and had waited until I was most stunned to lean in. He said, "Nobody wants to celebrate you anyway, Maya. You know that, right? You are always doing this, making yourself the center of everything." I said, "I understand." 2 words, that was all I could locate. And I hung up. The pasta was overcooked. The water had boiled down to a thin simmering layer at the bottom of the pot. I turned off the stove and stood in the kitchen for a long time and let myself feel whatever it was I was feeling, which was too big and tangled to name cleanly. It was grief and rage and a specific tiredness that goes all the way into the bones. The tiredness of a person who has been performing goodwill for an audience that never once applauded. Nobody wants to celebrate you anyway. Caleb was in the living room. I did not go to him yet. I needed to hold it alone first because I knew if I told him immediately, the feeling would come out sideways and loud, and I would not be able to think clearly. And I needed to think clearly. So I stood in my kitchen, in my apartment that I pay for myself, and I breathed. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in the dark and stared at the water stain on the ceiling, the one shaped vaguely like a running dog, and thought about everything. I thought about every dinner I had organized, every birthday card I had remembered when nobody remembered mine. Every time I drove an hour to show up for something Derek was doing, I thought about $18,000 sitting on my credit card for a party in his honor. I thought about my mother, smooth and certain, telling me to quietly dissolve the best thing that had happened to me in years so as not to inconvenience her other child. I thought about the word nobody for a very long time, and something in me went very, very still. Not the still of shock. The still of a person who has just decided something. In the morning, I got up at 5, made coffee while it was still dark, and sat at my kitchen table thinking. Caleb came out at 6:30, took one look at me, and sat down without saying anything for a full minute. Then he said, "Tell me." So I told him. When I finished, he said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to go to work," I said. "And I want to talk to Aunt Patricia." Patricia is my mother's older sister. She is 62, sharp as a blade, and the only person in our family who has ever looked at my mother and Derek clearly without the fog of favoritism that everyone else seems to breathe automatically. She worked 30 years as an office manager for a construction company and has exactly 0 patience for nonsense. I called her on my lunch break. Sitting in my car in the dental office parking lot, I told her what had happened. She was silent, and then said, "Well, I always knew Sandra would do something like this eventually." And then she told me something I did not know. She told me my mother had called her months ago, talking about how wonderful it would be to do something big for Derek's birthday. And that my mother had since been telling extended family that she had organized the event herself. That she had found the restaurant, designed the menu, made the reservation, covered the cost. She had accepted a great deal of praise and gratitude for this beautiful thing she was doing. Nobody knew that every single penny of it was mine. Patricia had not known either. Not until that moment. I sat in my car with the heat running and felt something shift inside me the way tectonic plates shift. Not loud, not fast. Just a deep realignment you feel more than here. Okay, I said. Here is what I am going to do. But before I get to the dinner, I have to tell you about the bobblehead situation. I have to, because it brings me a specific quiet joy that I need you to share. Derek works at a real estate office north of Columbus. He is an agent, not a particularly successful one, but he works in a real office with a carpeted waiting room and a bowl of mints on the front desk. He is very vain about his appearance. He leases a car that is more expensive than his commission supports and makes sure people know the brand. He is exactly the kind of person for whom the dignity of his public image is deeply, genuinely important. I found a website that makes custom bobbleheads. You upload a photo and they sculpt a small figure with a realistic likeness of your face on it. I had saved on my phone since a family barbecue in 2015 a photograph of Derek that I had always privately cherished. He had just gotten out of the above-ground pool. His hair was plastered flat against his head like a wet cap. He was holding a hot dog in each hand, and his eyes were slightly crossed because someone had said something funny at the exact moment the picture was taken. He looked like a man experiencing a minor personality crisis while simultaneously holding 2 hot dogs. I ordered 60 of them. I had them shipped not to his home, but to his office, in one large, unmarked cardboard box, with a note on the outside in cheerful font that read, "Congratulations to Derek on 15 years of real estate excellence. From your biggest admirers." No name. No return address. Just 60 small nodding versions of the pool hair, cross-eyed hot dog photo, each in its own plastic window. His office manager, apparently a very organized and proactive woman, assumed it was a marketing promotion Derek had arranged, and helpfully placed them throughout the office. On the windowsills. In a row of 10 along the reception counter. Near the water cooler. On the small table where clients wait to sign documents. Derek arrived Wednesday morning to find 60 miniature versions of his worst photograph greeting every client who walked through the door. He called my mother in a fury. She called me. I did not answer. I heard the rest from my cousin Terry, who heard from a woman at an insurance office in the same building and had watched Derek carrying boxes to his car at 11 in the morning with the expression of someone whose soul had briefly stepped outside. The process of finding and removing 60 bobbleheads from a professional office takes significantly longer than you would expect, especially when colleagues keep discovering ones you missed. One turned up on top of the break room refrigerator a week later. His office manager kept one on her desk because she felt she had earned it. I thought about this every night that week before I went to sleep. It helped enormously. Now, the dinner. 2 weeks before the event, I called Albury and asked for Claire, the events coordinator I had worked with from the beginning. Claire is a professional woman with a measured voice and the particular calm of someone who has managed a private dining room long enough to have heard every version of every family situation. I told her there had been a development. I explained that I needed the prepayment reversed to my card and the reservation updated into my mother's name. Claire told me the final bill would remain open because the bar tab, service charge, and any upgrades would still need to be settled that night. The dinner could proceed exactly as planned, but the card on file would no longer be mine. I told her that the dinner should proceed exactly as planned. 40 guests, open bar, 4 courses. The cake, all of it. Not one candle fewer. But that when the bill arrived at the end of the evening, it should go to the reservation holder. There was a brief pause. "And who is the reservation holder?" Claire said. I told her I would be updating the reservation into my mother's name. That she should present the bill and request a card from whoever had organized the event. That there would likely be some confusion. Claire, to her enormous professional credit, asked no further questions. She confirmed the updated arrangements by email within the hour. That same evening, I sent a message to every relative on the guest list. It was brief and calm. It said that I wanted everyone to know I had been the person who organized and financially committed to Derek's birthday dinner, that due to a change in circumstances, I would not be attending, and that I hoped everyone had a wonderful evening. I included Claire's name and the restaurant number. Then I blocked my mother's number and Derek's number. I put my phone face down on the coffee table, let Biscuit climb into my lap, and watched a documentary about penguins that Caleb put on because he knew it would help. It did, because penguins are very committed to each other, and I find that genuinely moving. The dinner was on a Friday. I went to bed early, I slept better than I had in 3 weeks. My cousin Terry called at 8:47 in the evening. Maya, she said, and her voice had that specific texture voices get when something has happened that is too large for normal words. Your mom, she said, has spent the last 25 minutes telling everyone at this table that she organized everything. She said she chose the restaurant. She described selecting the menu as if she had done it herself in a series of meetings. She stood up and gave a speech. Derek stood up and thanked her in front of everyone. I waited. And then, Terry said the manager came over very politely and asked for the card of the person who had organized the reservation. I was quiet. Your mom told her everything was handled. The manager said, Of course, we just need a card on file for the bill. Your mom said, What bill? This is paid for. And the manager said, The bill is currently open and with the bar tab and service charge, it comes to $21,240. I breathed out slowly. Your mother, Terry said, is currently sitting very still at the head of the table, not making eye contact with anyone. Derek just asked her in front of the whole table why she told everyone she had paid for this. She has not answered him. I said, if anyone needs to reach me, they can reach me, but not through my mother's number or Derek's number, because those are blocked. There was a pause. You blocked them, Terry said. I said I understand, and then I said goodnight, and hung up. Caleb was sitting across from me. He had heard my half of it. He looked at me for a long moment and then said, very quietly, Are you okay? I thought about it honestly. Yeah, I said. I think I actually am. The full account came to me over the next several days, from Terry and from my cousin Marcus, and eventually from Aunt Patricia herself, who had arrived partway through the evening and who, upon understanding what had happened, had stood up and told the assembled relatives some important context about who had actually made this dinner happen. She had brought her phone. She showed them my message. Marcus described the silence that followed as the kind that has physical weight, the kind you feel pressing on your ears. My mother attempted several explanations. She had meant to announce my contribution. She had been planning to thank me later. There had been a misunderstanding. These explanations were not well received, partly because they contradicted each other, and partly because Derek's face was doing something that made it clear he was hearing all of this for the first time, and was not pleased. The bill was split between my mother's card and Derek's savings account, draining a meaningful portion of what he had set aside. The mood in the private dining room had converted, somewhere between the third course and the cake, from birthday celebration into something closer to a very tense family mediation that nobody had signed up for. 2 of my aunts called me in the days that followed. One said she had watched how things worked in our family for a long time and that she was sorry she had not said something sooner. My Aunt Rosemary, who has always been quiet at family events, called me on a Sunday afternoon and said that she had always thought I was the one who held this family together and that nobody had ever given me credit for it and that she was ashamed of herself for not saying it out loud before now. She cried on the phone. I did too, a little, because I had not known she saw it, and it turned out that mattered more than I had expected. My mother eventually reached me through a borrowed number. The message said, I hope you are happy with what you have done to this family. I did not respond. Derek texted from his own number, which I saw later when I temporarily unblocked him. He said, that was childish and you know it. I thought about the word childish for a while. I thought about it coming from a 31-year-old man who had sat on a phone call and listened to his mother tell his sister to cancel her engagement, and had waited until his sister was most stunned to lean in and say, nobody wants to celebrate you anyway. I thought about what kind of person does that. Not a villain exactly. Something smaller and sadder than a villain. A person who has been told his whole life that he is the one who matters, and has believed it so completely that he cannot imagine a world organized any differently. I unblocked him. I wrote back 2 words. I understand. Then I blocked him again. Caleb and I announced our engagement that Saturday on our own terms. We posted one photo from Goodale Park, the oak tree, my hand, his hand, the ring catching a little of the afternoon light. The response was more than I expected. People I had not heard from in years reached out. Colleagues, old friends. Several relatives who had been at the dinner called specifically to say they were glad for us and embarrassed it had taken this particular situation for them to think about what kind of people they wanted to be. A woman I had worked with for 3 years left a voicemail I have saved and will probably keep forever. She said, Maya, I have watched you take care of everyone around you for as long as I have known you. It is about time someone took care of you. I played it 4 times standing in my kitchen. The 4th time I let it finish, and then I stood there a little longer with my hands flat on the counter, feeling the cool of the tile and thinking about all the years I had spent hoping the people who should have said that would say it. And how strange and clarifying it is when a coworker says the thing your family never could. We are planning a small wedding. The list of people we actually want there is shorter than I once thought it would be, and I am not sad about that anymore. A short list of real people is better than a long table full of people who were only ever there because they had always been. We know the difference now. And Patricia is coming. Terry is coming. Marcus is coming. He told me he had said something directly to Derek at a family event last month. That what Derek said to me on that phone call was one of the cruelest things he had ever heard someone say to a person they were supposed to love, and that Derek needed to think carefully about who he wanted to be. Derek said nothing back. Marcus said it anyway. There is something important in that. You do not always get a response when you say the true thing. You say it anyway. My mother has not apologized. I do not think she will. She is still telling her version of events to whoever will receive it, and some people do, because it is easier to believe a daughter overreacted than to believe a mother played favorites so completely she could not be happy about her own child's engagement. I am at peace with that. What I have not made peace with, and probably never entirely will, is the specific feeling of standing in a warm kitchen in the first days of the best thing that had ever happened to me, and hearing someone I love reduce it to an inconvenience. That stays. It sits quietly in a back room in me, and sometimes I notice it there. I do not try to move it out. It is part of what happened. It is allowed to stay. But here is what else stays. For years, I organized things for people who did not organize anything for me. I remembered birthdays that were not remembered back. I drove hours for events nobody drove for. I put $18,000 on my credit card for a party for a brother who told me 3 days later that nobody wanted to celebrate me anyway, and when the moment came, I did not scream or beg or perform my pain publicly. I moved my credit card. I blocked 2 phone numbers. I said I understand and meant something completely different than what they heard. And in the space I made by stepping back, the truth took up exactly as much room as it had always deserved. There is a photograph on my refrigerator from a brunch Caleb and I had a few months ago. Patricia and Terry and a few others. Everyone is laughing. The kitchen light is coming through the window at that particular angle of late morning that makes everything look lit from within. Caleb has his arm around me. I am laughing at something Patricia just said, and I am fully in my body in the way you only are when you are genuinely, uncomplicatedly at home. That is what I built. That is the thing I had been building all along, without knowing it. A table where the people who actually love you sit down and eat, and nobody pretends, and the bill gets split honestly, and the light falls warm through the window, and everything is exactly what it is. They showed up to a table I had set and expected someone else had already paid for it. And I was not there. I was here, right where I had always been building toward. And that made all the difference.